Yeah, so I designed the studio to be a good like podcast, like sound thing, and now I guess there needs to be a video element to everything.
Yeah, it's become a thing.
It is, and I'm not a fan of it, but I would say I have a face that's made for radio. So now that there needs to be a video element to everything, that's why I set up the camera and all of that. But we can go ahead and just pay attention to each other and talk. Forget it's there, and then some like I don't know. For the other podcast I do, I've been keeping it, an audio for Spotify and a video for YouTube. Well, now it's just the same video file for Spotify, and I was like, man, I'm old. I didn't realize Spotify had videos.
No, neither did I.
So that's why we get the video part of it. But yeah, I'm not too worried about it. It's as soon as I could just animate it, like have there be a cartoon duck talking. And suddenly the cartoon ducks are talking, like that would be wonderful. That way I wouldn't have to have my video on. I think that'd be great.
A couple of ducks talking F1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd be totally down with that. So, okay. You do not know much about F1. You're like a season, I should say, into Drive to Survive, right?
Correct. My background with F1 is we had you over to dinner and you talked about F1. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen Ricky Bobby, and you looked offended. So since then, I have started dipping my toe in that world, and
awesome.
And holy crap, there is so much going on, so much more than look, fast cars. It's rivalry. It's so much drama, so much political backstabbing.
And they mean it.
Yeah. So like, it's absolutely genuine, hard on your sleeve emotion.
Yeah.
Massive egos colliding at high speed.
And in season 1 of the Drive to Survive, like that's what I got into. I watched season 1 when I was overseas.
Yeah. And
they genuinely don't like, at least in season 1, they did not like that Netflix was there. Like, the vibe, like the drivers are like, man, like once, Daniel Ricciardo's walking around there. He calls him a bunch of C words. He's like, oh, Netflix is a bunch of this. And you're like, holy crud, dude. Like they genuinely didn't want Netflix around, and now it's all popular because
absolutely. And what's interesting, if you jump, jumping from the first to the current season, you can see the mid and higher tier teams have jumped on. Like season 1, like there was there's a whole episode. Is it Williamson?
Yeah, Williams. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Told you,
that's what we're here for.
I'm the new guy. But like they had this whole feature. Oh, and so down the road, we need to talk like, how do you get a driver? Like, do you buy a driver? Does a driver's family buy their way into a car? Because that happens. Holy crap! How do you let some? Oh, I mean,
well, no. So we'll go and talk about this right now.
Yeah.
Haas, right?
Right.
So Nikita Mazepin.
Okay.
I don't know I forget when he was there. So I want to say he was in the 2020 year. But anyway, Nikita Mazepin, Haas. They're a U.S. team that is on hard times, and one of Haas's big things was that they were, instead of having their own factory to make their own parts, they were going to buy parts from every place else.
Yes,
and they were running on hard times, so they finally got basically in bed with a Russian oligarch. And the reason that worked is, and this guy was like, "Yeah, I'll give you all the money you want, but my son Nikita Mazepin, gets to be one of your drivers."
Yeah,
and he just. We call them Mega Spin because he just kept the car was just too powerful for him as a driver, right? And he just kept spinning out, and he was not a good driver, and it ended up being Haas had to tune down the engine, make him not competitive.
Yeah.
But otherwise it was just too much.
But then at that point, what are you even doing?
Then what are you doing?
Right.
And all that went away when Russia invaded Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Haas cut ties with this Russian oligarch. They lost Nikita Mazepin, and
but good riddance.
Good riddance. They weren't doing anything good for the thing. And that's one thing I try to do here on the podcast is not talk too much crap about drivers and their abilities, because there's a saying where it's like, I got playing poker that there's no good being number 10 in the world if numbers 1 through 9 are sitting at the table with you.
Sure.
Yeah. So like you if you're number 10 in the world, you need to make your money playing number 200 in the world. Like you need to beat other drivers. So a lot of these drivers, like they're good. They're top in the world at their craft. The problem is they're racing against people like Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and all of this. And it's like, well, as soon as you're classmates with Lando Norris, and he gets a McLaren that can actually do stuff, and you're stuck on pick your team that can't.
Right.
Well, then what it is.
And that's another thing that totally caught me by surprise,
Mm-hmm.
and that I kind of love is that going into this, I thought all F1 cars were standardized. So it was, yeah, you can fund your team, and you have engineers to make sure things are in good repair, or that you can minimize the time for part swap out and things like that. No, but there's so much more open-endedness in terms of design concepts. So yeah, you have a wide variety of skill sets within a driver, but guess what? Best driver may not have the fastest car, may not have the best car, and so if that ends up being the case, and you're a few races into the season, man, averaging 6th or 7th place may be a huge win for your team that year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that was entirely new to me, and the fact that they go into the new season kind of going, okay, our engineering team has designed this car. I hope it's good.
I hope
it doesn't suck, and that I don't die.
Right?
Like that's wild. And, and these cars, I mean, these teams are spending $300, $400, $500 million a year. A crash is $1 million price tag.
Yeah, that's just to get you back where it was.
Yeah,
and then you have to do some sort of freaking forensics to figure out what went on.
Oh, and then, here's the crazy thing too, is it's going to happen. The crash is going to happen at every race.
Yeah.
So like every team is perpetually hemorrhaging money, and they're fine with it in the name of maybe we won't break, and maybe we won't crash, and maybe we'll be the fastest on that day.
Yeah.
See what happens next week in another exotic location. That's
It's awesome.
How does America not know about this? Like,
I know.
It's such a cool concept.
It was such a best kept secret. Like, when I was over in Bahrain, and there's the first race of the season's in Bahrain.
Yeah.
And so we used to go race go-karts at a track, next door to the Bahrain circuit. And that was when I got into Formula One. I'm like, man, this is freaking amazing. And since then, there's been like 2 more. That was like 4 races. They have a permanent paddock in Las Vegas.
That's new this year.
That's new this year. Yeah. So last year was the first Las Vegas race. So yeah, so it's coming more and more to the United States. It
Absolutely.
really is.
So I know they have. Is it Miami in Florida?
Yep. There's Miami. There's Texas,
and now
there's
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, and there's one more. Miami. There's Texas. Man, I should know this. This is going to be embarrassing. So last year, race 1 was in Bahrain, race 2 was in Saudi, race 3 was in Australia, 4 was in Azerbaijan, 5 was in Miami.
Just for the sake of Middle America, we need to have one of these like massive races just in the middle of nowhere, like somewhere in Nebraska. I'm sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry if you're in Nebraska.
That would be awesome.
But I don't mean to dump on you at all. But like, how cool would that be? Just it was like when a couple years back when they did the Field of Dreams Major League Baseball game, which was magical. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. But no, it must have been 3. I think you're right. It's 3. There's one in Canada. Maybe it's just 4 in North America then. I don't know. But yeah. So regardless, Texas, Miami, and Vegas for sure.
Okay, well,
they should bring out to. They really should have one in like Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
I think in a cornfield in Illinois or something.
Absolutely. So again, though, this is a fantasy podcast.
Yeah, we're not even.
So if I may, can I explain F1 as I understand it, and then as soon as I start making mistakes, which is going to happen a lot, that'll open up opportunities for explanation.
This is a fantasy podcast, but in order to be a good fantasy player, you have to understand the sport itself.
That's true.
So I will keep like pulling us back to the fantasy world and like what it means for that. But yeah, ask away any and we can just sit here and talk about DRS or whatever for 30 minutes, and that'd be just fine with me. I know we mentioned it before, but yeah, go for it.
Sure. So to your point, I know fantasy football, but and I'm not good at it, but I do understand football, which is kind of fundamental to doing well at the fantasy sport. So F1, as I understand it so far, is a series of, this year I think it's 23 races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
held on a weekly basis.
Close to it. Yeah.
Okay. And then there are 10 teams right now.
Yes, there are 10 teams.
And are those called constructors?
Yes, yeah. So there's 10 constructors. Each constructor has 2 drivers.
Okay, and these are by and large corporate entities, but some of them do have state funding. I think this.
Yes and no. So usually, and they're all. And it's weird for me to say, they're all kind of in bed with each other anyway.
Sure.
So, like, for example, here, let me pull up my stats here, right? So, like, Red Bull, so AlphaTauri is owned by Red Bull.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, Red Bull, and again, for me to say owned probably isn't 100% accurate. There's probably purists out there like they're not, I don't, but they're in bed with each other. Yep. And like AlphaTauri runs a Honda engine, Red Bull runs a Honda engine, and how about this? So their full names right here, right? Haas isn't Haas. Haas is Haas Ferrari.
Are you serious?
And this is what I pulled from their F1 website. Okay, and I need to go more into it because I don't know.
Okay. So
anybody put a comment on here, talk to us about how all this works, because
I'll back it up to basics, because that was a question that I had again watching season 1 of Drive to Survive. There was a whole discussion of Haas being unhappy. I think it was Haas being unhappy with their level of support from Renault. And in my head I'm going, okay, hold on a minute. You have a Renault engine in your car and you're getting hopefully a level of customer support, but you're also directly competing against Team Renault. So there's got to be some tomfoolery going on there.
And there is. And which would be, then that gets into the haves and have not.
So that's wild to me that that's allowed to exist.
Yeah, McLaren isn't McLaren. They're McLaren Mercedes.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. Okay. At least that is what I pulled from the Fantasy F1 website. And that is stuff that I need to learn a lot more about. But, AlphaTauri runs a Honda engine and Red Bull runs a Honda power plant as well. So because Red Bull is right here, Red Bull Racing Honda RPT is the official Red Bull.
Oh my gosh! Okay,
so pull the stats from the F1 website,
the slick and fancy image of F1, it's a pretty backwoods, pretty incestuous marrying our cousins
exactly
league. Okay,
because it's all about the money.
Well, yeah.
You get a whole and the killer part. They're trying to add an 11th constructor. All right. Now,
okay, well that's yeah. So, dude, we're going down like 50 different rabbit holes.
We are.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing here. And I'll pull us back to go down a different rabbit hole in a second.
Okay,
but and I need to do a lot more about this. In order for there to be an 11th constructor, they have to pay all the other constructors for their slice of advertising time, basically.
Well, sure.
Camera time.
Yeah.
The number I heard, it was like 800 million.
Oh my God.
Or more is over. I forget how. And again, I heard this on a podcast.
Because Haas was the last new constructor, and that was in 2016.
And most of them they get renamed. Yeah. So like, for example, and I forget one of them, and I forget, I have to go back and look at who's in, but there is one of these teams that we just talked about is already under a new name.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I know Renault became Alpine.
Okay. And I think, and now there's one of these, it's like owned by like a cell phone company or something like that.
Oh, crazy. Okay.
So, yeah. So it changes around a lot, the actual team names.
Yeah. So down the road, we need to talk what are the barriers of entry for a new constructor, because so currently there are 10 teams.
Yes.
Each team consists of 2 cars, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Before we go down that road, can there be a team with only one driver? Is that a thing? Has it been a thing? Or is it generally, if you are a constructor, you will have 2 drivers?
The way it stands now, I don't know the rule book. Each team has 2 drivers. You can drive one.
Okay.
I guess, because people have, like, if they crash out or the driver gets hurt or something like that, they'll just field one car. I don't know why you would want to if you're allowed to have 2, but yeah. So as far as I know, the standard is 2, and everything else is just a deviation from it. Could you race one? Probably. But as far as a team joining that only has one driver and therefore they get to pay less, and have that be like the benefit, I've never heard of it being a thing.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. I wondered maybe if there'd be like a lower cost point if you were only going to take one space on the track.
I don't know. And since the FIA, who owns it's a private company, they can do whatever they want. They can charge whatever they want. They can change the formula however they want.
Sure.
And I don't see them with how much money is flowing around that, having somebody get an easier or a less expensive way to join the league. I don't see them going for that.
Okay.
So if I had to, without knowing the truth, without looking up the rules, I'd be like, nah, there's no way that the FIA is going to let somebody join with just one driver and end up paying a smaller chunk of the pie.
Yeah.
I don't see them going for that.
Well, that does make some sense though, because in this year's season, I know there's infrastructure in place for them to have up to 26 cars per race. Now there's only 10 teams, 2 cars per, so you've got 20 cars, but the structure is there for expansion.
Oh, okay.
So
I wasn't aware of that. That's good to know.
Yeah. So I guess up to 3 more constructors.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, I think they're trying to lay the groundwork for as visibility of the sport continues to increase across the world.
Sure.
There's,
No, and that
you know,
makes good sense.
there's
It's just so expensive.
I know. That's
Just so expensive. But yeah. Okay, no, that makes sense. So I didn't realize that they had the capability to add the 3 more drivers already. And it just depends on that, which makes me even think more that they wouldn't allow people to come in onesie twosie.
sure.
No, they're gonna, if you want to. Otherwise, like, and kind of like with I don't know how many drivers are in NASCAR, but I imagine as soon as the F1 allowed the field to fluctuate that much, it would kind of water down their brand, if that makes sense. It'd probably make it very exclusive to get into F1.
Sure.
Where with NASCAR, like the cars bump and grind and spin out, and you rip the sheet metal off, and you kind of keep going.
Yeah.
Where with with F1, if you bump into something, then they're like, "Wait a minute, is everything okay?" Nope, pull it, and then you retire.
Sure.
You know?
And then, or if they can continue on, there's still there's penalties, which
Yeah.
I know very little about.
Which is, it's sick. It's awesome.
Nice.
But so what? Now that we completely went down that
Sorry,
rabbit
okay.
hole, no, I love it. I love it.
So 23 races,
23 races,
10 teams. Each team has 2 cars.
correct?
And they race in beautiful locations across the world. And at the end of that, there are 2 championships we're playing for.
Correct.
There's the individual world champion, which is the point total champion, individual racer at
Yep.
the end of the season, and then there's the constructors champion.
Correct.
Champion.
Champion. This is constructor
okay.
championship, constructors
And
champion.
so that's just going to be the team. That's the combined point totals of both drivers throughout
Correct.
the season, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And every level difference in the constructors championship is like tens of millions.
Yeah.
For like, if you are the second place, let's go down. The 10th place constructor is going to get in prize money tens, 20s of millions of dollars less than the next position up.
Right. Okay.
So everybody wants to fight for that. But to your point, a lot of them aren't fighting to get to be in the top 3. They're fighting to not be the worst. And that's
Yeah.
what went on with Haas, why they had to change their team principal, because he got last again after so long. And so out he goes. There's more
and
to
so
it.
it's a battle of relative victories.
Yeah. So you can have, usually, like, if you have whoever wins your overall drivers champion recently has been on the constructors, has been correlated with the constructors championship as well.
That would make sense.
Yeah. But like, for example, Red Bull, they were constructors champion last year along with their drivers placing 1 and 2.
Okay.
But rewind a few years back, the last time Lewis Hamilton was maybe it was that last time Lewis Hamilton was, or was the first time that Max Verstappen was the other constructor won the championships. And I forget if it was Lewis Hamilton won championship with Red Bull being the constructors championship, or it's probably Max Verstappen won drivers championship with Mercedes winning the constructors championship.
Gotcha.
I'd have to look back at that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not always a 1-for-1, but
Yeah.
they're strongly correlated.
Okay. Cool. That's good to know. So that's kind of the extent
Okay.
of my knowledge of what goes into that.
Okay.
From a top down perspective.
Perfect. One thing I want to mention, because we talked about it before I forget, and I know I will, the drag reduction system, DRS.
Oh, okay. That's what that stands for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's drag reduction. So
real quick, I was watching. I've been watching Drive to Survive, and as someone's about to overtake someone, you can hear the principal on the headset going, "He's got DRS," and I have had no idea what that meant. So when we were off camera, I was asking about that, and it was bothering me.
So here I have all these little toy cars. These are
great.
still on their. So these don't know if these older ones have DRS because they don't have the halo on them.
Yeah.
No, nowadays they have the halo, which saves a whole bunch of people's lives and stuff.
Sure.
So on the back fin, so F1 cars are unique in the fact that the faster they go, the more grip they have. So meaning when you go into a turn, they actually want to be as fast into a turn as possible. If they're slower, they actually have less grip in the turn.
Sure. I get
Where
that.
if we're driving our cars, right? If I drive my Honda Civic, I want to slow down for a turn.
Yeah.
For these guys, they need to speed up for a turn. Why? Because their cars are like basically big airplane wings. So the back fin, that where the air hits it and gives them all that downforce, they have the capability to push a button on the steering wheel, and it has the back fin basically go neutral, and the whole back fin flips.
Oh,
like that.
interesting. Okay.
And as soon as that happens, it decreases the downforce, and it gives them like total 30 extra horsepower or something like that, because they're no longer getting that wind resistance that's giving them downforce.
Oh, man.
They have less they have less downforce, but they get more speed beyond it.
Okay,
So
that's manually controlled.
That's
by the
manually
driver.
controlled by the driver.
Okay,
And
I didn't know if that was a sensor-based thing or what.
Well, it's both, because you only can use DRS in certain DRS zones, and you have to be within 1 second of the car in front of you at the DRS speed trap when you cross this line.
Oh my gosh!
As soon as the computer senses that you are within 1 second of the driver ahead of you, because they have, and there's on F1.com, they have all these tech talks, and they have like basically like every however many feet on the track, they have these like sensors.
Okay.
And there's multiple sensors in the nose of these cars that senses all of this, and it feeds it back real time and whatever. No longer do you have like the stopwatches where you're keeping track.
Right.
They have it down to the thousandth of a second. And maybe it's 10 thousandths. I don't know. I forget. I haven't seen that TED Talk in a while. But once the computer senses, the track senses that you're within 1 second, it enables your DRS, which is why, that's why you hear them say they have DRS.
Yeah.
It means that the person behind them is within 1 second when they pass the speed trap, and now they can push a button. They can engage it, and now just get 30 more horsepower.
Oh, shoot. That's
exactly.
crazy.
Which is why, as soon as you get DRS, you'll see cars just blow past each other. Oops. Yeah, that's okay. We lost the logo because my other computer went to sleep. I'm fine with that. But yeah, so that's why you'll see cars just blow past each other. They're like, how come they're not? So this car has been in the lead for like a long time. Now this car just passes them. Yeah, because it had drag reduction on it.
Okay.
And
so so say you do pass, what's the time limit for disengaging DRS?
I don't know. I think it's probably the next speed trap.
Okay.
But I know that, for example, if you're in the lead and I get DRS and I pass you, well, then I have to be further than 1 second ahead of you at the next DRS speed trap. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my DRS because there's no one ahead of me.
Oh, I gotcha.
And now you have it.
So you need to pull ahead.
You need to pull ahead. Now you have it. And what they started doing last year, and this is where it gets sick.
Yeah.
They started doing, well, not started, but one of the byproducts, and I'll talk about the other thing, is DRS trains. It's where you have multiple cars all within a second of each other, so everybody has DRS. So as we go through the speed trap, you're number one, I'm number two, and this guy's number three. Well, we both get DRS.
Yeah.
So me here being in the third, I can't pass the guy in front of me because he has DRS too. So we both have the same.
So you're going at the same rate.
So we're going at the same rate. And you'll have multiple cars like this.
But guy in front could suddenly lose 2 spots like that.
Unless you're Max Verstappen.
Well,
because he's and then in the 2023 season, that was a thing. He was just so dominant that no one could pass him. He'd get out ahead of you.
So it's just a matter of aggressive coverage.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And there's probably a lot more to it. You know, we could spend entire episodes talking about Max Verstappen and his car and stuff.
Oh, sure.
But the another thing that this is what they did start doing is, so as soon as, how about this? You have 3 teams, right? And the example I have here is I have a Ferrari, a Mercedes, and a Red Bull. Well, as soon as for the points, I'm in the lead here. Mm-hmm. I don't want Red Bull to get second because of the points. They're going closer to me.
Yeah.
So you here in your Mercedes, I want you to stay second.
Got it.
So what do? I back off. So at the speed trap, I am 0.99 seconds. I'm because you have to be within 1 second to pass.
Oh,
so I'm 0.99.
Okay.
So now you have DRS. After the speed trap, I give you DRS. I put the foot to the floor and I leave.
Yeah.
So now you have that 30 extra horsepower that prevents Red Bull from passing you.
So in addition to not dying,
at
any given time on the track, and in addition to to trying to remain dominant and win, you also have to have enough, as a driver, you have to have enough awareness of the overall order of what's going on because points are being decided.
Yeah. And towards the end of the season, that's how that sort of gamesmanship comes down, which pisses off everybody.
Oh, sure.
Because now, wait a minute. So you're now telling me a Ferrari is helping a Mercedes against a Red Bull?
Right.
If you're Red Bull, you're pissed as hell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But they're like, there's nothing wrong with it.
But what's great about that too is that gives your mid-tier cars a chance to move up.
Yeah.
To move up a bit, and because ultimately if they take, I mean, hopefully not the win, but if they take either the win or they take a higher pole position, they're not hurting you, but they're hurting your competition if you can aid them in getting ahead.
Yeah, and that just is an example that happened a couple times of people backing off to try to give somebody else DRS to try and help them defend against who they didn't want.
That's wild.
It's super sick, but the aerodynamics behind these things are ridiculous.
Yeah,
and before we get off, so you have the DRS right with the rear fin giving you, but you were talking about I think they called it porpoising, how it bombs. Yeah. So it's the Venturi effect underneath the car, right?
Yeah, the more air you let underneath the frame, you're going to get
more. Yeah, so as soon as you get an increase in speed, results in a decrease of pressure, right? So as soon as you have like an airplane wing, the air hits the airplane wing, air goes faster over the wing than under it, creates a low pressure zone, and it generates lift. So on an airplane wing, you're getting higher pressure underneath your wing, which is pushing you up, and a low pressure, which is also sucking your wing up.
And just to clarify, Paul here has an aviation background. So
I do.
He's not pulling this out of nowhere. He knows a thing or two about this.
A thing or two. So now we take that to the cars, and they're so low to the ground that they get that low pressure zone underneath their car.
Okay.
And it actually sucks them to the ground and gives them more downforce.
Yeah.
The problem is if it's too much downforce, eventually it can't. There's too much downforce to keep the car there, and it's not enough downforce to keep the car, so it pops up. The bubble breaks.
Gotcha.
And then now suddenly there's a lot more room for the air. The air will pull a car down again. So when you see them porpoising, it's because the balloon's basically inflating then popping, inflating then popping, inflating then popping underneath the car, and it does that.
Gotcha.
So
and when that's what we saw season 5 of Drive to Survive. Lewis Hamilton's like, this is the most painful race of my life. This is miserable. And is that something they?
They address it.
Yeah, they'll. Yeah. So
they address it.
Team, was in the hot seat a little bit, but
and then maybe we can talk about that being a reason why they're going to Ferrari. Good old.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can talk about the driver carousel for sure. But one question. So I'll try to steer us back to the fundamental understanding of how F1 in general works. So you go through your season.
Yeah.
You've got your individual and your constructors champions. How do you get points? Because what I've been watching is you have to get to a certain place in order to actually score any kind of points
Correct.
for your team and individually. But I haven't caught at what level are you scoring points or getting nothing?
So you start scoring points at position 10.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
P10 through P1, then you're getting some points. 11 through 20, you're getting nothing.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. So that is a
huge drop.
It's a huge drop off, and it really really matters for fantasy Formula One because as soon as you are going to place P11 and your car's damaged, and the more long because you're being a military man as well, right? You have to have that depletion of forces versus how much good you do, right?
Sure.
And as soon as you have a machine or a ship or something that the longer you run it, the more damage it's going to take just because it's not perfect. You have to weigh mission accomplishment versus, how much damage you're doing and is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yep.
Well, with the cars, as soon as you're going to finish P11 and you have some damage, it's not worth it.
Yeah. Why bother?
Why do, to your point, another $500,000 worth of damage? Yep. I'm just going to retire you. I'm going to pull you from the race. And now you're not getting any FIA points, championship points, but you weren't going to be getting any the way it is.
Okay. Well, and so thank you for explaining it. Just because, again, early races that I've watched, it feels like on such a regular basis there will be something mechanically wrong with a car, not necessarily to a catastrophic degree. Like maybe we pull in and assess and see what we can do about it. But it's like, oh no, something's wrong. Pull over. You're done. You're done. And the drivers are pissed off because it's just like, well, my weekend is shot, but they're not even going to try to give it a fighting chance. But it's because at this point, there's no way you'd get either to the, if your starting position was already P17 and now something is wrong, you might be able to fix it and fight back to 12th or 13th place at best. So why? Okay, so to your point, why bother?
Why bother?
Okay,
it's not worth it.
That element of logic had been lost on me until that point, and I was just like, this, for all the hubbub about being a racer, this happens a lot. Where
happens
just like,
constantly.
Something broke
because they'll be out millions of dollars if it's not right.
Yeah.
So now, but let's take that out of the. So how about this? real Formula One does not care about fantasy Formula One. They can't.
Right.
Fantasy Formula One is a game that is designed to try and emulate the real world, right?
Sure.
In real world, you're right. As soon as your car is jacked up and juice isn't worth the squeeze, they retire you. And especially for the teams who, like you said, started P17, a win for them would be to get to P10.
Yeah.
But they know it's probably not going to happen.
Sure.
So you'll retire. In the fantasy Formula One game, you get negative 20 points if you retire.
Oh no.
Huge penalties. So for any given race, like if Max Verstappen leads and does great in a race,
Yeah.
the average points you'll get are in your 30s,
Okay.
right? A huge point intake for any car in a fantasy Formula One race is 50 points.
Okay. So this is great, just because, again, so currently I have no idea how fantasy Formula One works, and that was by design. I'd like to discuss that here and kind of learn along with you if you're new, and you can roll your eyes if you're a seasoned F1 vet. I'm sorry for taking up your time, but so this was answering a question, because I don't know how many drivers you select. I don't know all of what you select, but in my head, I'm kind of going, well, of course you're going to go after the drivers, the Max Verstappens, the Lewis Hamiltons, but this really gives you a huge motivator to look at the field and say, okay, who has the most reliable cars? And, like, who hasn't run into engineering issues?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're caring a lot about a constructor's engineering team now.
And
And
now suddenly it matters a whole lot.
and also the quality, not just the speed of the pit crew. So you're not having issues where it's like, oh yeah, they didn't bolt the tire back on right. It's like, oh, that guy kind of sucks.
Exactly, right. It's now their race is trash, and now you go negative 20 points.
Yeah.
So for the whole season, like, as soon as you have a driver who is like, man, he's going to do really great, well, he goes negative 20. But then if my driver goes negative 20 for the race, your driver goes positive 30 for the race.
Sure.
Well, now that's a 50-point swing in one race. And that's very difficult to come back from.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so we will, and this happens to me constantly. I forget what we were talking about.
We were talking about at what point do you get points versus not?
Okay. And that's a big thing. So yeah, thank you. So, and that's why it really matters for, like, your tier 3 drivers, right?
Sure.
Your Haas's, your AlphaTauris, things like this. They're only 5 or 6 million. Like, they're not. You get $100 million for your driving budget, and each driver has a money value attached.
Yes.
For Max Verstappen's 30 million. For example,
are you talking about in fantasy?
In fantasy Formula One.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you get a budget.
You get a budget, but that is the reason why, as soon as you get negative points for DNFing, for do not finish, does not finish, DNF. If you get a DNF, it doesn't matter whether you were in the lead for the whole race. It doesn't matter at all. If you get a DNF, you get negative 20.
Okay.
And now, don't get me wrong, if you've passed a whole lot of people and you had 5, 6, 7 points for passing, now that 7 points turns into negative 13.
Okay.
But it's huge, because as soon as you're in real world, you don't care about DNFs. You don't want them, of course. You have no one wants to quit. No one wants to fail. But as soon as you're driving and you're getting weird indications from your engine, you're going to retire the car. And it doesn't matter. You didn't get any points, but you're not detracted points in the real world.
Yeah.
In fantasy world, you're detracted heavily for not finishing. Real world, nope. There's some people who finish with not many FIA points or 0 FIA points. They don't go negative. In the fantasy world, you go negative. All right, we're talking about car evolution.
When we were discussing kind of the staffing model for teams, you had mentioned that each driver has their own engineer, which I had no idea. And then you were talking about how even though you have 2 cars on the same team, they're not necessarily going to be identical builds. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I would think that an engineering team would develop a car for the season and go, oh, this is the best we've got, let's give it to both drivers.
Right.
So what are some of the differences you're talking about?
So some of the differences are, and the best way I can summarize it is a concept of understeer and oversteer.
Yeah.
So as soon as you and I are both drivers and we both start at the same team, let's say I enjoy a little bit more of an understeer. So understeer, and you tell me if I go wrong here.
Sure.
Understeer is when you turn the car's wheels and the front tires skid before the rear tires do. So I go to turn, and the tires turn, and there's not enough steer, and I keep going straight for a little bit before I actually steer.
Yeah, it's going to be less immediate.
It's going to be less immediate
responsiveness.
response. Okay, that's good. Yeah. And then an oversteer is as soon as I turn the tires, my back end starts going around.
Yeah.
And it's a very fast, very nimble response.
If you look at the steering wheel, it's going to start turning.
Oh, exactly. Okay. So, for example, with Red Bull, allegedly, now keep in mind, I am no driver. Allegedly, Max Verstappen's Red Bull was very oversteer.
Okay.
So as soon as he thought something, his car was turning.
Gotcha.
Right. So because of that, he was very nimble and he could handle it. Where Sergio Perez's car was not so much oversteer. I don't necessarily say he was more understeer, but because of that difference and the difference in the way the drivers are capable and really want to drive, he the car evolutions would split at that point. And then as soon as we're 2 or 3 years down the road, our cars would be very, very different.
Gotcha. Okay.
If that makes sense.
No,
and that's a example, probably a poor one. But I know that's one thing that came into it in like two or three seasons ago with Mercedes was George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton's car was very differently set up than George Russell.
Okay.
And Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes strength is just straight speed. All right. So as soon as you got him on a straightaway, he was passing everybody.
Yeah.
Not so much in the turns. George Russell was very upset because his car didn't have as much straight out speed as Lewis Hamilton's.
Sure.
Well, and then they went ahead and swapped cars, and both drivers stopped doing as well because their cars weren't set up for them.
Oh, wow.
So they had to relearn how to drive their cars, basically. And so that was what I kind of liken it to the old World War I biplanes and triplanes and stuff of the air war in Europe. Was the nimbler, like the Sop with Camels, and the nimbler your aircraft was, the better you could fly and the better you could dogfight, but the more pilots you killed in training.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So like as soon as you're like, great, I have this really nimble aircraft, but it's really hard to fly.
Yeah.
Where with these cars, as soon as you have a car that's much more stiffer and a car like, okay, I can drive it fine. Well, it might not be that competitive because everybody else is driving closer to the ragged edge.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Oh no, absolutely. It's kind of the eternal balance of two extremes. The car is safer, but it's not going to be as fast. It's like, of course you want to care for the driver's safety, but why are we here?
We're here
to push the limit,
it,
and we're here to just have that edge over everybody else.
And this does play into the topic we're going to talk about, which is the actual fantasy Formula One side of this. But it used to be back in the day, you could have a qualifying car and a different car to race in. Oh, because in the two of the big elements in Formula One is you have your qualifying.
Well, and this is one thing that one further thing that we needed to discuss before we get into the
that's true.
fantasy F1, which is the race weekend itself.
Gotcha.
What are your practice and your qualifying runs, and how do they impact the race?
Okay, so they really impact the race. So for now, there's a whole asterisk here because it's different for a sprint weekend.
Oh, I don't know anything about a sprint weekend.
And not many people do.
Okay.
I'm personally conflicted on the ideas of a sprint weekend. The FIA did not ask me my opinion, so my opinion is not worth anything.
We'll get there.
But we'll get there. Yeah. We'll get there, right? Excuse me, before we change things, hello, Jason, what do you think? Oh, there you go. So anyway, on a normal weekend, you have final practice or free practice. I forget what the F stands for, 1 and 2.
Okay.
And 3. And those are just hour blocks that you get to have. You bring your driver to the course that you're going to be racing on.
Yeah.
And he gets to tool around however you want.
Sure. Because I mean, at this point, the drivers have been doing simulations, I'm sure. Yeah. But this may be their first time ever at that course, or it's been a year.
It's been a year. Exactly. Exactly.
Quick potential rabbit hole question. So it's a lot of the same established courses every year.
Correct.
Do they change from year to year, or is it a fairly set course?
It's fairly set. The courses can change.
Okay.
They won't change constantly year to year.
Yeah.
But and I don't remember off the top of my head which does change or don't change. But like some of them are street courses.
Okay.
So that would vary. Whatever streets they have it on or off. But some of them, there's one that's coming to my brain, but I don't remember what it looks like. that every year it's and for me, every year it seems to be a little bit different.
Okay.
But for the most part, for by and large, they're the same. They're around 3 kilometers each.
Sure.
And between 3 and 4. And the little differences will be they'll get rid of a turn here, like, and it's what I'm thinking of. They either added a chicane to a straightaway, and you could see where before there was a straightaway, and now it goes around.
Okay.
Or I forget if it was they took out the chicane and had it be just a straight line.
Gotcha.
But there are little things like that. By and large, a lot of these places they haven't changed.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And standard, I forgot what we were talking about. The race weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your 3 practices, FP1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And we, as fantasy players, really care about those because we get to actually see how the car's doing.
Yeah.
I ran my own statistics on if those practices predict driver performance on the race.
So real quick.
Yeah.
Are there separate practice runs from a qualifying
Correct.
run? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's practice, qualifying, then the race.
I had been under the impression that the practice runs are also your qualifier.
Oh, no.
Which would
No. That would really suck.
Yeah, so this is good. All right.
So you have your 3 1-hour practice sessions, and they don't necessarily, some of them, I was able to correlate that some drivers always do better than they do in their practice runs, but the talking heads, myself included, are really big about, who won the practice? This person came in first in the practice. No one cares. Mm-hmm. No one cares about who does better in the practice. There's actually requirements to let the third driver, the team's third driver, run at least one of the practices.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, just so they actually get some time in a car, right?
Absolutely.
And so you can't really take the practice, because, for example, if you and I are both racing on a weekend, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you have a new upgrade. And that's one thing I forgot to mention earlier, is that these upgrades that they do, there's different waves of upgrades that drivers can put on throughout the season.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there's a whole big thick rule book about what you can and what you can't do.
We'll have to delve into that.
Yeah.
And it's progressive.
It's progressive throughout the season.
So week 23.
Week 23 is very different.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the lesson from 2023 is Austin Martin. The first few upgrades they did were great. And then the second upgrades, and then after like halfway through the season, their upgrades stopped working. So they actually reverted back to the previous setups.
Oh, that sucks.
And that juxtaposes with McLaren, who started the year, couldn't put 2 tires in front of each other.
Yeah.
And then just started doing great because of the upgrades they got.
Oh, very
which
cool.
We'll go into that later.
And this brings up a good point too, talking about the third driver getting a chance to at least run the course. Because if one of the drivers goes down, this harkens back to your earlier point about each vehicle is kind of attuned to that individual driver. So that third driver has to not suck. Like, you have to be able to adapt to whatever the style is of the car that you end up sitting your butt into. And that's wild.
Right. Sitting in a jet aircraft that you've never, that you haven't actually, no kidding, flown before. Like, yeah. It's ridiculous.
No pressure.
Right. And then you're sitting there and your job is to not goof it up as the third driver. They're like, hey, listen, man, we need to sit you in this cockpit. Don't crash and die, please.
Right. Yeah,
right.
No, and that's exactly it. Like how many millions less are you making than your starters?
So. And I can only imagine, but my guess is quite a bit.
But that being said, if someone wanted to give me the chance to be a reserve driver,
right?
I'd be, sure,
absolutely.
I'll
Nobody would say no to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh gosh, which is and this is something we'll it's teed up perfectly, so I'm going to talk about it now.
Okay.
So there's only one American Formula One driver.
Is there really?
Yep. Logan Sargent, who drives for Williams.
Okay.
He's the only American in it.
Huh.
And he was had a rookie year last year. He only got 1 FIA point. So he only finished in the top 10 once. And technically, he only finished 12th. But the 2 of the top 3 got disqualified for a technicality, and he fleeted up.
So what little I know about the different teams. So Williams, they have funding issues, correct?
Yeah, they're a tier 3 team.
So running at all is a victory for them.
Correct.
So,
getting in the top 10 at all is huge.
Okay, so in terms of speed of car,
yes. They're just not. They're not at the level of your tier 1 teams, your Red Bulls, your Ferraris, stuff like that. They're just not.
Okay, so under the circumstances, good for him.
Great for him.
Okay.
Yeah, but the talking heads, the pundits, if you will, love biting off on some things that kind of create drama.
Sure.
One of them is whether or not Sergio Perez would stay driving for Red Bull, because Sergio Perez isn't as good as Max Verstappen.
Okay.
So he came in second in the Drivers' Championship.
Yeah.
Right, he did great. But there was talks about whether or not he's going to stay because he is night and day not as good as Max Verstappen. And to our point earlier, the cars should be mostly the same.
Yes.
But now Sergio Perez has half of the fantasy points that Max Verstappen had.
Okay.
And so the pundits really enjoyed talking about and wondering if he was going to be around, He is. There's nobody better. The only reason he's number 2 is because Max Verstappen's there.
Okay.
If Max Verstappen wasn't there, he'd be number 1. It'd be game over.
Okay, so I'm sorry. We need to talk about one other thing
Sure.
here. So when we were talking about the team rundown, you've got your drivers, you got your principal, you've got your engineer, you've got your pit crew.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk team dynamics versus individual drivers because why wouldn't Perez go somewhere else and have a chance? Or actually, no, sorry. So that was a good example, but let's bring it back to how much of a race is dictated by the principal's preferences on how the two cars in his team interact with each other.
And you get varying answers from that, and it depends on how close they are together and depends on the race.
Okay.
The reason being is if the two drivers start two different parts of the race, like let's say, so you get penalties like we talked about, right? You can, we haven't talked about it, but you mentioned you can get penalties. As soon as I have to replace my engine, I have to start at the back of the pack.
Okay.
Okay, regardless of how I qualified. But let's say, barring anything like that, let's say you qualified first and I qualified 10th.
Yeah.
We are both going to be racing two very different races.
Absolutely. Sure.
So they're trying to have me, and let's say it's bone dry, right? Not a cloud in the sky. It's bone dry. You're racing in Bahrain. I'm 10th. You're first. We're both going to be, driving with our standard tires, whatever the compound is and all this, and we can go into all that. But you starting in front, you're going to be driving a very different race than I am, and we're fine.
Yeah.
Now let's change that scenario. Now we both qualify 1 and 2.
Okay.
Now I want to win. You want to win.
Sure.
The team will dictate who lets who in front. Those are called team orders.
Okay.
So basically, the team can come down and say, "Hey, you're 1, Jason's 2. Jason, don't race him. We're not trying to pile up and crash like Red Bull did, 3 or 4 years ago."
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
yeah.
It was bad.
It was bad, and so we're not going to do that. And for you and me being military men, we get that. It's very much a hey. Here it is from on high. You are first. You are second. Go do good things for the team.
See, I would think though, isn't it so much easier to protect a lead point just strictly from a point standpoint if you have the number 1 and number 2 car?
It is.
Where you could have one, number 2 guy run a protection for your leader.
But number 2 has to be willing to be running protection.
Okay, but see, here's the thing. So this is where, what are the dynamics between the principal and the drivers? Where he's going to say, "Hey, listen,
exactly.
This is my team, buddy. You can drive my car, but you will drive it where I say."
Yep. And this came into play in 2023 some because of I want to say it was Mercedes.
Okay.
So Lewis Hamilton was, and again, hopefully I'm not remembering this wrong. If so, it's going to be embarrassing. Lewis Hamilton was a contestant for second place in the points championship.
Okay.
On some given race, Lewis Hamilton was Lewis Hamilton was second, and his teammate George Russell was third. And Sergio Perez is coming up to pass him in a Red Bull, which is a faster car.
Yeah.
The team orders were Russell. So Russell had a faster lap to lap. He had better tires than Hamilton had. He had fresher tires, which we'll go into tire stuff later. So the team orders were, again, hopefully I'm not mistaken. If so, this is a fictitious interaction that still gives good morals. The team orders were Russell block Perez so that Hamilton got more points when he finished second.
Right.
And the points, so if you finish first, you get 25 FIA points.
Okay.
Championship points. If you finish second, you get 18. If you finish third, you get 15. If you finish fourth, you get 12. So Mercedes, in this example, wanted to keep Perez back and put 2 spaces between Hamilton and Perez.
Yeah.
So that way Hamilton got do mental math, 6 points or whatever more. Team orders were Russell, even though Russell was faster.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Because he was faster, they said, Russell, don't pass your teammates and try and put the press and get a solid, because if Russell passed him, he'd get a solid second place.
Sure.
But as soon as you put Perez with his Red Bull up against Lewis Hamilton and his Mercedes with aged tires, then the worry was he'd get DRS and just pass.
Yeah.
Right? And because of the championship, what they wanted, Russell was out of the contention for second place. They wanted team principle, big picture. They wanted Hamilton to get more points than Perez.
Yep.
And they looked to Russell and they said, you will defend and you will block. And that's it. And Russell said, no, if I pass with like 4 laps left or 6 laps or whatever, I can actually put the pressure on Max Verstappen for the victory.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're not worried about one race. We're worried about the season. We're trying to do all this. Team orders came out for Russell to defend and whatever, and he just didn't do it.
Yeah. Well, almost identical situation the previous season, 2022. Leclerc was in front, bad tires, and then it was
Sainz?
Carlos Sainz. Yeah. Yeah, and he, up to this point, he had like 143 races, never had won before.
Maybe I'm just misremembering. And that was actually the situation.
I watched this the other night.
Okay, that might be it.
Carlos was like, nope. And,
yeah,
and Leclerc was just pissed at the end, and Sainz is spraying the the
Yep.
champagne everywhere.
Yeah,
and
but that's not what the team wanted. Right, and I mean, maybe the example I'm talking about with Mercedes still did happen, just a little bit different.
I don't
probably
doubt it.
a lot,
Sure,
but that's a perfect example right then.
Yeah,
right. The team wants them to finish a certain way, but the reason why both of these guys are in the seats that they are is because they're ultra aggressive and they want to win.
Yeah,
it's kind of like telling because football is really big in the United States.
Yeah.
Right. It's like telling them, hey man, listen, just don't catch this pass. Hey, quarterback, we really need somebody else to do. Well, don't throw to this guy who you know is going to get a touchdown.
Yeah.
Throw to this other guy because we need him to get better stats so he can get a whatever.
Or, let's keep it even simpler. What's the one racing reference that Americans do know? Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
Hal
exactly.
Naughton Jr.
Hal Naughton Jr.
Like, it'd be real nice if maybe I could win.
Maybe I could win, but no.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
Yeah, like just bury it down deep and don't ever bring it up again.
Exactly.
It hurts, and I love you. So okay, cool. So I didn't know how much that existed.
So that does it's really big.
Okay.
As soon as you, and which is why, again, we're getting really down the rabbit hole, which is why as soon as you have somebody like Daniel Ricciardo, who from team to team is always that second driver,
right.
You want to go on a team. Do you want to be, how about this? Do you want to be, what's that? And they actually did a science experiment, a psychology experiment, because my undergrad was in psychology.
Okay.
And they actually did an experiment. I don't remember, like my sister-in-law would get mad at me because I'm not citing my sources well. But they said, no, if they went to a bunch of people and they're like, hey, would you rather make $100,000 a year, but all your peers are making $200,000? Or would you rather make $50,000 a year with everyone around you making $25,000? And the overwhelming majority would rather be the highest paid person, even though there was less than whatever. Sure. And so, and that's just to say that the drivers want what they want, and for the team to sit here and say, hey, that's not what we're going for. We need you to do this. You and me being military people, we accept orders as, hey, we have commander's intent, and that's it. But
well, I mean, if you want to take a really out of left field comparable or parallel here, I mean, the show Suits is doing really well on Netflix, even though it's been off the air for a couple of years. But the main character who's got this photographic memory, and he's super brilliant, but he got his law degree under false pretenses.
Gotcha.
He hits a point a few seasons in where he's a successful lawyer, and he's getting to the point where he could be a hot shot, but if he gets to a certain level, he'll be too visible.
Gotcha.
And he's kind of accepting, I always have to be the background player.
Okay.
And am I willing to still do that? When at the end of the day, it's like the fact that you're even broaching this whole world of upper tier New York legal, sexy law practice. Yeah. Which I don't know if that really exists on that level, but it's fun. But I don't know why I'm referencing another Netflix show that's doing well. We're not sponsored by Netflix.
We're not sponsored by Netflix. There you go. That'd be awesome.
Anyway, so there is that.
There is that.
Yeah, and so if you look at drivers who have this like notoriously invincible ego, which I think you kind of have to have. You have to be willing to do some really, really stupid stuff just to get into one of these cars. You want a good team player as that second driver, but if they really have that mentality of I'm willing to do whatever it takes for the team, do they have that killer instinct to be a driver?
Yeah.
So, man, what a weird balance it has to be.
That's a very good point.
You know?
You want somebody who can drink your blood, who's willing to drink somebody's blood from a boot.
Yeah.
But also you want them to be able to stop. No, hang on. Just let this other guy win.
Yeah. No,
Like,
it's got to be like all Icemen and Mavericks.
Yep.
And there's
Yeah.
there's no room for Goose. He's going to die.
Right.
You know? Like, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, cool.
Exactly. So you get it. And so in Fantasy F1, I haven't looked at so full transparency. When I emailed the Fantasy Formula One people, I went onto their little help link.
Okay.
And I'm like, when will the new fantasy game drop? Because I need to know this. And they said they'll expect it to drop over the practice weekend that's coming up here on the 21st of February.
Yeah.
21st, 23rd.
And today's what, the 16th?
16th.
Yep.
We're recording this on the 16th. It just dropped. It just opened up.
Oh, no way.
That was what we were looking at earlier. Why I was like, wait, what? It's here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can start picking your teams now, 14 days out.
Oh, cool.
Which blew my mind. But anyway, I'm a little peeved at the website people for not knowing when their new one was going to open up. But I haven't looked at the prices or values or anything yet. So I'm still going to go off of the 2023 values.
Okay.
They're valued as a primary and secondary driver.
Interesting.
So if you look at the value, like Lewis Hamilton was valued at like $30 million at the end of the year.
Okay.
Sergio Perez was like mid-20s, like 23.
And just for clarification's sake, and we're talking about their value within the fantasy construct.
Within the fantasy construct, yes.
Not based on their actual income
Correct.
level. Okay.
Correct.
We're going to get into the details of all this because currently, as of record, I have no idea how Fantasy F1 still works, and I'm learning this along with you if you're new. So thanks for bearing with us. We will go through this because if we get to next episode and I don't know how to do it,
I was about to say,
way behind.
We've been like, okay, let's talk about Fantasy Formula 1. No, we're just talking about F1 and whatever. But that's the reason So in the fantasy construct, you're given $100 million budget.
Yeah.
Each driver and constructor has a monetary value, and the ceiling is $100 million.
Okay.
So as soon as you want your Max Verstappen's of the world, and I haven't looked at the price, let's say Max Verstappen's $30 million, right?
Sure.
Well, he takes up basically 30% of your budget for that one driver.
Yeah.
Everybody must field 2 constructors and 5 drivers.
2 constructors, 5. Okay. And so what do you get with the constructor?
With the constructor, you basically get another copy of all the points your team puts up. So if you get Red Bull constructor,
okay.
So let's say you have Sergio Perez and you have Max Verstappen, right? Those are your 2 Red Bull drivers.
Yeah.
Let's say they each put up, let's say one puts up 50 points, the other puts up 30 points in a fantasy weekend. Well, then if you have the constructor, you get 50 points for Max Verstappen, 30 points for Perez, and then you get another 50 points and 30 points for the constructor.
I see. Okay, cool.
And with the constructor, there's also bonuses and stuff you can get. As soon as both drivers, which this gets back to the expressing the weekend that we completely got off track about, as soon as both your drivers did get into the second qualifying round, within the constructor gets a bonus.
Okay.
2 drivers get to the third round of qualifying, constructor gets a bonus. Things like this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it really matters because and for the 2023 season, and I did the math, but for the 2023 season, roughly a quarter to a third of all the points you get throughout the season are bonus points.
Gotcha.
So as soon as you pick poor constructors, then you're going to lose out on a lot of points really quick. Constructors are very, very important. So that's why you have to pick a good constructor. And that's how constructors get their points, is they take another copy of it. So if you get 2 guys, both of them get 50 points. Well, then as a constructor, you're also getting another 100 points. So you get 200 points just for both of those guys getting 50.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as soon as you get a lesser end constructor, well, you don't. You want to get the best constructor possible as a general strategy because you get a carbon copy of those points that the drivers get.
Okay. And
so constructor is extremely, extremely important.
And so I think, the immediate logical question following that explanation would be, well, why not always double up on the constructor that your racer is associated with, so you're always essentially double dipping on points? And I think the reason you wouldn't do that is just because you want some variety, because you live and die by the success of your individual driver. True. They're not going to always they're not always going to be performing at the peak. So you want to have some variety. Like, again,
that's very true.
And I think that might be the one parallel with maybe like fantasy football, where you don't want all your players on one team.
Exactly. If they're on a bye week, then you're screwed.
Yeah.
That is true. Everything you just said is absolutely right. However, they, with 2023 specifically, Red Bull and Max Verstappen were so dominant that after you went 3 races without having Max Verstappen on your team,
You're done.
You're done. Everybody had to have Red Bull and Max Verstappen specifically on their team.
But
otherwise, you weren't competitive.
You never know. Like at week 4 and beyond, there might have been a fundamental flaw with his car.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what happened with Aston Martin. But we'll get into that later. But the thing is, like, let's say 4 races into it, Max Verstappen crashes out.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. As long as he doesn't lose his nerve and he still comes back and races next weekend, you're still in the green.
Sure.
Because of all those weeks you had him. You know?
I'm with you.
And there's a lot of people who really would root against Max Verstappen just because he's the once in a generation driver and people love to watch people lose.
Absolutely.
But in fantasy, like, you can have your casual fantasy F1 players, you can lead by the heart, or you can have your actual competitive ones. In 2023, if you were competitive, you had to have Max Verstappen on there, regardless of how you felt about him.
Sure.
So there's that. And again, I keep completely getting sidetracked on everything we're talking about. But this is part of the reason why I love this podcast.
Yeah.
So we can actually talk about it, because it's really lonely when you're like, I want to talk about fantasy Formula One with somebody. And then my wife, man, I can only talk to her about it so much before she's like, dude, come on. But then she'll text me and be like, I just saw Max Verstappen in the news. I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at that.
Nice. No, again, I'm in a similar boat. In another channel of life, I like to build and break down and customize guitars and basses and stuff. So I'll be talking to her. I'm like, so this is a PJ style pickup, and it's a lot more clean, but soap bar pickups are different. She's like, that's nice. I'm glad you have a hobby.
Honey. Yeah, this is really nice, honey. Good job.
Yep.
But all right, so we're going to backtrack 20 minutes and talk about the race weekend.
Oh, right. So
we never actually finished.
So
that.
we covered practice.
We covered practice.
Okay.
Practice is very important. Practice, and this is important for all you people out there, and for you as a brand new fantasy player.
Yeah.
Practice doesn't equal anything.
Sure.
You might go out there and you're trying to just put on a couple laps, keep it nice and slow, save your tires. I might go out there and really want to try some new computer mode or just get some good reps in. Yeah. You might go out there and have a whole new setup and you really need to try to do lots of hard reps, right? Like, we all go out there with our own desires, with our own goals. How about that? We go out there with our own goals for practice. So the talking heads love to say, well, this guy did good in this practice. This guy did good in this practice. I ran the stats on 1st through 20th on all the practices for the season, and drew correlation between how well they did on which practice versus how well they finished in the race.
Sure.
And there was a few drivers that always finished better than their practice was on, like, practice 3 or practice 1. But that's as close as I could get them to correlate, because it just varies so much.
I mean, it's preseason versus regular
season. It's preseason versus regular season, exactly. So you don't know what they're going to do. They're protecting their quarterback and making sure their wide receivers have good legs.
Right.
That's what they're doing. So that's your practices. And for anybody, and so this is for a standard Grand Prix weekend.
Okay.
Race equals Grand Prix. All right. So then you have your qualifying, and this is super cool. So it's an hour long with I want to say like a 15-minute, 12-minute, 10-minute session. The sessions get smaller. But basically what happens is everybody's in the pits. The session starts. Everybody has to log their fastest lap. And whether you sit in your pits until for 19 of the first 20 minutes, then only get one lap in, or whether you do lap after lap after lap.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It doesn't matter. It's free. Yeah. It's like an open practice. But as soon as at the end of however long the qualifying session is, the numbers 1 through 15 for qualifying 1 will move on to the next round.
I mean, it's and so this is all about vehicle liability.
This is vehicle, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you can take 20 tries, but man, every time you take that car out, it could explode.
It could explode. And what the killer part is, and this is a whole nother, we should do one whole podcast where we talk about tires.
Yeah.
Because they always race with different types of compounds. You have to change tires at least once, and you have to use 2 different compounds of tires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez,
there's a whole lot of rules here.
There are so many variables.
And you can get penalized if you don't. So, and you're only given a certain amount of tires of different compounds for all race weekend.
Okay.
So as soon as you go out and practice and go out in qualifying and you're putting laps on, like, let's say you have one compound of tire that's only good for 15 laps and another one that's good for 30.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you go put 10 laps on this compound that's only good for 15, you only have 5 laps left in those tires.
Okay, so day of race.
Yeah.
How much discussion is there where they're looking at the environment, the
A
weather,
whole lot.
Like, oh my god,
And that's what really matters.
The asphalt is sticky.
Exactly.
Or it's a rainy day. It's like, dude,
Yep.
you're taking
Well,
3 laps.
And here's the thing.
Okay.
Asphalt being sticky versus not, as the cars go around the track, they lay rubber down on the track from their tires.
Oh, sure.
So it makes the track more sticky.
Okay.
So the track, everyone's doing a second or two faster at the end of a qualifying round than they are at the beginning.
Okay, so how much controversy or how much discourse is there over like
A whole lot.
if you're the last practice of the day, how much is that changing if you're the first?
It's everything. They call it track evolution.
Okay.
Track evolution matters more in some tracks than not.
Gotcha.
But for example, what they'll do is the cars will go out. You'll have guys who, so in order for you have to have crossed the start line for a qualifying. You have to have crossed the start line.
Yeah.
At when the time expires, and then you get to finish your lap.
I'm sorry, my brain's
So
being
because you get, let's say you get 20 minutes for a qualifying round.
Okay.
Right. You have to have left the pits, gone around the track.
Yeah.
And then cross the starting line at speed by the time the clock hits 0.
I see. Okay.
And then that whole lap does count.
Oh shoot. Okay.
Okay.
I'm with you. Yeah.
So what you started to do is they put a speed limit. What they started having people do is they would come out of the pits and go really slow and keep their tires really hot, and then slowly go around the track. And as time was about to expire, then they accelerate and cross, because that way there's less track evolution beyond them.
Okay.
Because if you head out of the pits 5 minutes in, the track will be a second faster by the time I leave the pits at 19 minutes in.
Yeah.
Assuming for this example, it's a 20-minute thing. So you'll go out there and you'll drive around, but you could be a second faster if you did the exact same thing in 10 minutes.
No way.
So a lot of the third tier, the lower drivers, who it doesn't really matter, they're going to go out and try and put the best laps they can in when there's no one else on the track.
Sure.
A lot of the higher drivers.
I'm sorry. Qualifying happens with everybody at the same time.
Everybody at the same time.
Oh, see, I thought qualifying was everyone still has.
Oh
their
no,
individual
you're
turn.
you're not. No, and that's.
Oh,
you just hit the crux of it.
Okay.
It's a free for all. It's Wild Wild West style out there.
I was gonna say. Are there penalties at that point? Or
Well,
no?
and no,
because I mean,
well, you can. There's certain things you can do, and that's. See, you're jumping on all the right cylinders.
it's got to get dirty.
It does.
Okay.
And so what happens is, now imagine, and again, they changed some of the rules halfway through 2023.
And just to clarify, if you're for qualifying, you're racing for pole position.
You're racing for pole position.
Not pole position.
You're
but
racing for the
starting
faster
position.
you go, the faster you do one lap,
Yeah.
the higher up you start.
Gotcha.
And in qualifying one, you're just trying to be number 1 through 15.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
16 through 20, that's the starting grid for them, and they don't go on to the next round.
your chance to even get to any
Exactly.
kind of points is
and
so much
then
lower. Okay.
yeah, and then of the 15 who start qualifying 2, only 1 through 10 move on to qualifying 3.
Oh.
And then numbers 11 through 15, that's where they finish, that's their starting grid position. Then 1 through 10 fight it out, and then that's 1 through 20 for the starting grid.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we will have to.
we will have to,
re-explain
we
that
can
at some point,
yeah,
because-
absolutely. Does that, yeah. So basically, if for qualifying 1, it's a free for all for 20 minutes, say 20 minutes, I forget the exact time, 20 minutes. At the very end, when the clock hits stop, they rack and stack everybody's fastest lap numbers. The bottom 5, they're now starting number 16 through 20 for the race.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah. And then everybody else gets to go do it again. But now the second time, I think the first qualifying is like 10 or 15, it's like 15 or 20. Then the second's 12. Qualifying 3 is only 10 minutes long. So it gets the fewer cars that are on the track.
Okay.
The
So
shorter
qualifying 1, man, like you want to be gunning it, but you also don't want to.
You need to save your tires.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So you want to be fast enough to be out of the bottom
exactly.
5.
But not so fast that you scorched your tires and you're not going to be able to compete in.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes some races, they actually dictate which, like they start at the end of 2023.
yeah.
Q1 is on the harder compound. Q2's on medium. Q1's on soft.
Oh my gosh.
Or sorry, 1, 2, and 3. Sorry, Q1's on hard. Q2 and Q3. Q3 being the highest qualifying level. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but where we're getting into the initial thing we were talking about is with track evolution. What they were having was, as soon as we go, I go to start my qualifying run right before the end, right? Because it has the longest lap evolution.
Yeah.
Well, 15 other cars are all queued up, going nice and slow, keeping their tires go so they start right at the time expiring, or as close to as they can. So here I come hauling ass around, wanting to do my lap, and there's a whole bunch of people going really slow.
Yeah.
That's a hazard for me. And you would have people, because as soon as you back off the gas during your qualifying lap, you're not going to basically qualifying time.
Right.
So it's a whole bunch of people going really slow around the track. Then someone starts qualifying and then they come up and they hit somebody, or they almost hit somebody.
Yeah.
So what they changed now is once you leave the pits, you have to maintain a certain speed.
Okay.
But all people start doing then is queuing up in the pit lane. So now they'll literally pull out of pits and they'll just stack up. And then when the guy in the front decides he wants to go to make his qualifying time, he'll go. And then everybody else has to wait for like an interval.
Okay. So qualifying day is like ultimate passive aggressive.
Ultimate passive aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you.
I mean, it works out well for the race though, because it's like, man, it's like Friday.
Oh, everyone's being a little.
Everyone's going to be pissed off.
Everybody,
and so everyone's got a chip on their shoulder on race day. Okay, that's awesome.
And then so now, and where you qualify, if you qualify in the top 10, that gives you fantasy points.
Okay,
so you want to qualify, the higher you qualify, the more fantasy points you get just from doing good qualifying.
Sure.
And from a constructor standpoint, as soon as both your guys, one gets into Q3, the other gets into Q2, you get a bonus for that. Right. So qualifying really matters.
Yeah.
To say that. So then after all 3 rounds of qualifying, now this is really important. Your teams, your fantasy F1 teams are frozen before qualifying. You can't make any more adjustments.
Oh, sure. Well, no, that makes sense because I mean the race is starting on qualifying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Qualifying's when actually, so they stop it. If you're doing gambling like with Vegas, no, then it's only about the Grand Prix.
Okay.
So when you go to bet on fantasy Formula One, which that's a really huge thing in the United States, is gambling on fantasy football. It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
But with fantasy Formula One gambling, it only matters for the race because and that's a whole nother again topic we can get in on.
Sure.
So we talked about free practice. We talked about or final practice. We talked about qualifying. Then we get into the Grand Prix. All right, and that is basically the race.
Yeah.
So now, and this is something that a philosophy, a theory, if you will, that I've been handling. For a lot of the cars. So they do a standing standing start. So everybody gets one lap to get their tires all up. They all get their starting grid. Unlike NASCAR, there's only one car on pole position. You'll have inside pole and outside pole for NASCAR.
Okay.
In Formula One, they're all staggered.
Oh,
so there's only one pole position.
All right.
Second place is like about a half a car length behind, so they're not starting in the lead. At the beginning of every race, the first lap is the closest. The starting grid is the closest a lot of cars in the back will ever be to the lead. So everybody on that first straightaway, everybody is jockeying for position, is bumping and rubbing, like they're trying to gain that position, right?
Yeah.
So the first lap in the first turn is chaos in an F1 race. And the FIA allows them to do a lot more contact with each other during that first lap.
I mean, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable. They're going to. So, and it's also the most interesting part of the race.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And you will see, and we could watch it, you will see races where the first lap, just cars get shredded, half the field's out, and then they end up red flagging it and they have to restart.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then they do all the races, and then you can get, if you don't get penalized or whatever, you do all the laps, of the race, and then you rack and stacked at the end, and then there's your weekend.
Gotcha.
And then as soon as the weekend's over, later on that day, they go ahead and give out the points allocated, and everybody rinses and repeats for the next weekend.
Sure.
Some important things, red flags. So this happened several years ago. It used to be if a car crashed or spun out or whatever, and they couldn't get it off the track, they just keep racing, and with the car sitting on the side of the road.
Yeah.
All right. Now you don't do that anymore.
You get a safety car now, right?
Now you get the safety car.
Okay.
Yeah. And it used to be that if you could just quick crane the car off, then you wouldn't even stop the race.
Yeah, no harm, no foul.
But somebody got killed once because a car spun out, hit the fence. They brought a crane out to pull the guy off. The race didn't stop. And another guy spun out in the exact same place.
Smacks right into
it, and it killed him. So What they do now is if there's any sort of, if the car has to be pulled, then they yellow flag the race, right? You have caution, right? So laps keep ticking away because you're under caution. If there's debris on the track, then they'll stop the race. They'll red flag it while they clean up the track.
Okay, so when they are stopping a race, does everyone pit in the?
Yep.
Okay.
Everyone pits. You maintain your order.
Okay.
Everyone pits.
Gotcha.
And then you wait, and then you come back out and you do another warm up lap, and then you do a standing start.
How does that work? Because you've got, everyone's got their assigned pit position. Regardless of their original order. So do they have to?
Well, you don't go into the pits. You go into pit lane in your order. They dictate what the order was.
So
at the time.
they're not going to the. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. But then they go into the pits. You're still able to change tires, though. They can still work your car.
Okay,
you just have to push their stuff out to you and do it real quick.
Interesting. Okay.
And where this is even more interesting. So let's say I'm starting out at P17.
Mm-hmm.
I muscle up ahead to P9. You crash out with somebody, and we all have to red flag. Well, now we're doing a new standing start. And I'm starting in P9.
Yeah.
See, which is why that when the official race says, "Hey, this is when the official call is red flag from this moment on," what position you were matters. So a lot of the back of the pack will muscle for rank.
Now,
and yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
That's fine. But the back of the pack will muscle for rank.
Yeah.
And as soon as you have, like, for example, Sergio Perez in Mexico, he was passing a Ferrari. I'll get my little cars here. The turn was going this way. He shot past a Ferrari and tried to turn. Well, they both occupied the same spot, and he got put out of the race.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if they red flagged it. I think they red flagged it at that point. But all the people who muscled for rank behind them, when they restarted, I forget if it was a full restart or not, but that can matter, especially if a lot of times if it's the very beginning, they won't do it. They'll just do a rinse and repeat restart.
Sure.
But if you're a few laps in, then you'll have different ranks.
So let me ask here. Say we're well into a race,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's and how long? I mean, I know they vary, but how long do these races last?
Between like 60 and 70 laps.
Jeez. Okay. So say we're lap 40.
Sure.
And you have 2 or 3 cars way ahead of the rest of the pack, right?
Yeah, baby.
And then so you've got P3, and there's maybe a 12-second gap between P4 and everybody else. P7, P9 are being idiots, crash into each other. We've got a safety car situation.
Yep.
Everyone queues up.
Yep.
What's going on with that gap between
Shrinks
P3
to zero.
and P4? Oh my God.
Yeah. And
that's
a huge thing because also cars will do tire changes.
Yeah.
Based on that. So as soon as, especially in 2023, when Max Verstappen was always like a minute ahead of everybody, right?
Yeah.
You will have, okay, I know I'm not going to catch Max. So I'm 30 seconds. Let's say a pit stop will take 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm 30 seconds ahead of number 2. I'm number 2. I'm 30 seconds ahead of number 3.
Yeah.
But Max Verstappen, number 1, is a minute ahead of me. So I'm going to go for a harder compound of tire that has less degradation. I'm going to pull into the pits. I'm going to get a harder tire. So I'll still come out after 20 seconds. I'll be 10 seconds ahead of number 3 still.
Sure, yeah.
And he has old tires.
Yeah, he'll have to stop.
He'll have to stop eventually. So he'll have old tires. I'll have solid tires. They'll take me to the end. And I'm a rock solid number 2.
Yeah.
Right? Perfect. And this happened with, I want to say it was Lando Norris at some point. Goes into the pits, gets new tires, comes back out. P17 and P18 decide to tangle it up. Now we're on a caution. Now I have hard tires. Or let's say you get red flagged even. That'd be even worse, right?
Right.
So now let's do caution instead. So then what happens? Well, Max Verstappen now is I'm bumper to bumper with him.
Yeah.
But my tires it'll take a few laps for me to get them heated up because with hard tires, they last longer, but they have less traction right out the gate. Okay. You have to get them hotter.
Yeah.
Right? But Max Verstappen now, he had a minute ahead of me, but his tires were trashed because they were older tires, and he was just going to coast ahead. He knew I wasn't going to be able to catch him, so it was fine. So now we're in a yellow flag situation where I have tires that aren't meant to catch him. He has shit tires.
So he's going to pull in and get some.
But there's only 20 minutes. There's only 20 laps left.
Okay.
And I am right behind him.
Yeah.
So he's going to come out in the middle of the pack and have to pass everybody again. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but if his tires are already trash, I mean,
no. And this is the issue.
I hear what you're saying.
He spent all race
building
that lead.
Okay, so at the end of the day, you can never trust a long lead.
Correct.
Okay,
correct. Because anytime somebody somebody could ruin it for you.
Yeah.
So now what happens here? Does he duck in and come back out and now suddenly he's P6 or P7?
Gotcha.
Or does he try and run on tires that are bad?
Mm-hmm.
But what about me? My tires, I won't be able to keep up with him for the first 2 laps because my tires have to take a while to get warmed up.
Sure.
So he can go, but his tires are crap. I can go, but it'll take me a couple laps to get there. But by then, like, and it throws in, it just messes up everything.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
one nuanced question within that. So, safety car can ruin all, the gap in a lead. However, what about in situations of lapping? Because I was watching one the other night. There was an episode about Schumacher's son.
Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, and he's like, and he's gotten as of that episode that I watched, he had gotten better, but he had some rough races where he was just trying not to die.
Yeah.
And Verstappen would come and like full on lap him.
Mm-hmm. It happens a lot.
Okay, so lapping happens, then a safety car comes out. Does Max get to keep his lap ahead?
He does.
Okay, cool.
He does. So the one time he wouldn't get to do that is if, like, how about this? If it goes to the safety car, again, I haven't flipped through the 100-page rule book recently.
Oh, sure. And again,
but I liked it. No, this is great. So this is why the whole podcast is here.
Okay.
So the safety car comes out in front of the lead car.
Yeah.
And then everybody else gets to wait. And everybody else queues up behind him in their current position.
Okay, gotcha.
As soon as there's lap traffic in the middle of there, best in my knowledge, they just queue up the way they are.
I see. Okay.
So if you pass me once, and now you're coming around to pass me again, and somebody wrecks out, but you haven't passed me for the second time, the pace car gets in front of you as the leader, and since I'm ahead of the pace car, I get to go all the way around and form up on the back of the squad.
I see.
But I'm still 1 lap down. I don't get another lap out of it.
Oh, sure. But so a safety car is out. It could be safety car 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Because you'll be in the order that you were.
The safety car would get in front of the leader.
Yeah, that's what. Oh, I see. Okay.
Wherever the leader is in the track, the pace car gets in front of them. So let's say you're leading.
Yeah.
And you're lapping the entire field, right? Let's say you're doing great. And you've already lapped up to P9.
Yes.
And so you're coming up on P8.
Safety car's going to
Safety cars get in front of you in 8.
Okay, so
and then everybody else comes and forms up on the back of the field.
So you do kind of lose your lap.
You do kind of lose your lap a little bit.
Okay.
But it also depends on how many laps down you are, because you just get that one thing back.
I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And at least to the best of my knowledge, that's how it works.
Gotcha.
And that's where also blue flags come into it. So blue flag means, hey, you're being slow. Someone's going to pass you, and for the safety reasons, you need to let them pass you. Is basically what it is. And if you get a couple blue flags and you don't acknowledge them and you don't let them pass you, then they'll give you a 5-second penalty.
Oh, wow.
Or worse, they'll black flag you and retire you from the race. Now, no one gets black flagged too much anymore now.
Sure.
Now that you have the radios and you actually know what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if I'm going really to think, 20 whatever with old Schumacher, he's sitting there, he's just not going too fast. Right? Because of whatever.
Sure.
And you're coming up to pass me, they're going to show me a blue flag and say, hey, you have faster people coming behind you, and I need to sacrifice my time, get off the main line and let you pass me.
Okay.
And if I don't, then you can eventually disqualify me. The race control can disqualify you from the race.
Got it.
Because you're being a hazard.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And again, you'll get blue flags a lot, but very rarely does it get to the point that people are getting penalized, and I haven't seen anybody actually get disqualified for the last couple of years at least.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I realized we've been talking for a while again.
Yeah.
So do you want to wrap up just what the race weekend looks like, and then maybe next episode we talk?
Let's do that. So the nice summarization, and I didn't even get to. So that is the race weekend.
Okay.
With your practice, three 1 hour practices, 1 hour qualifying session with 3 rounds.
Yep.
And then you have the race, the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Unless you have a sprint race weekend. What happens then is you only have 1 practice. Then you go straight into your qualifying for the race.
Okay.
Then you do a small qualifying session for the sprint race. And then you have a small, third of a Grand Prix race on the day before the actual Grand Prix.
Oh, wow.
So, and it was done to let there be more racing.
Okay.
And if it sounds confusing, it really is. It really is. But the important thing for us as fantasy players is that you get only 1 practice and then your teams freeze. and then you have a qualifying session on Friday. You have a qualifying session for the race on Sunday.
Yeah.
Then on Saturday, you have a qualifying and then a sprint race, which is only a third the length of the Grand Prix. And then you have the actual Grand Prix on Sunday. And why it matters is that everything in the sprint race is basically half to a third value.
Okay.
So if you win, you only get like 9 points for winning a sprint.
Okay. Yeah.
And so as soon as I am, let's say I qualified first for the Grand Prix, the last thing I want to do is put my car in jeopardy.
Oh, absolutely.
For sprint.
Yeah.
But as soon as I'm P19, think Haas, think Alpine, think AlphaTauri, well, I'm going to go balls out on the sprint race because that's the best chance I have to get actual points.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm already going to be starting P17. So guess what? I'm going to start throwing elbows and start trying to pass people.
Yeah.
And count on your Ferraris and your Red Bulls not wanting to ding up their car before the actual race.
Sure.
So you get a lot of the people with those lower tier teams will get championship points in the sprint where they wouldn't normally in the Grand Prix.
Okay.
And it kind of mixes up a little bit.
When did they introduce that? Is that a relative to? Okay, that's a whole new.
They tried to do it a few years ago. They started sprinkling it in, but I only actually started understanding it last year.
Okay.
So maybe that's a ding on my intelligence, not necessarily that. But I'm personally on the fence with sprints. Like I know they're good for the crowd and good for the people there, and it's more racing.
Sure.
But the issue is that a lot of the drivers they're not committed to the sprint, right? They want to, everyone wants to do well, but it's so short. And there's one pit stop, and I don't know if there is a mandatory pit stop or not, but it's so short that for the higher tier drivers, there's a lot of risk there. If you put it into the wall, then you're really not going to be able to compete. And since the max points, I think if you win, you only get like 9 championship points.
But again, some of these third tier teams, these are the points they will get because otherwise, again, you see these races where it's like he got his first points of the season, 15th race in.
Hey, yeah,
that's sad that it's so happy.
Yeah, exactly,
It shouldn't be that big of a deal. Okay.
But that's the big races, and the important thing is for us as fantasy drivers that after the practice, whether it's 1 practice or 3, after the practices, everything freezes, and we're stuck with what we have.
Gotcha.
Except for there's a couple exceptions, but we can go into that for the next episode.
Sounds good.
Sweet.